Every 68 seconds, someone is sexually assaulted in the United States alone. Globally, nearly 1 in 3 women will experience physical or sexual violence in their lifetime. And every day, women everywhere move through the world adjusting themselves around male behavior. They are holding keys between their fingers, they are sharing live vacations with their friends, they are pretending to be on calls while crossing the streets at night. And they're laughing nervously when they feel uncomfortable because rejecting the wrong man the wrong way can become dangerous very quickly. And somehow we still talk about violence against women like it appears out of nowhere. But I don't think that's true. I think a lot of violence against women begins long before the violence itself. I think it begins with what I want to address today, which is entitlement. And before some people immediately get defensive, let me say this clearly. This video is not about saying all men are predators. It's not about demonizing men. And it's not about pretending women are incapable of harm. That's not what this conversation is about. This conversation is about the culture that quietly teaches many boys and men that women exist partly for male use, male validation, and male actors. Not always directly, but subtly. In movies where persistence about rejection is framed as romantic, in songs where women are spoken about like rewards, and in the way girls are taught to protect themselves before boys are taught to not violate people. In the way men react to rejection with anger as though access to a woman was something they deserved instead of something that was never owned to them in the first place. Because whenever conversations like this happen, people immediately respond with, well, not all men. But honestly, I think that response completely misses the point, because this conversation is not about individual men. It's about the environment that shapes those men. Because men are not born believing women owe them attention, or emotional labor, or sex, or submission, or access to their bodies. Those beliefs are taught, and they are taught by society. And once you start noticing it, you start seeing it everywhere. You see it in how women's boundaries are treated like negotiations. How quickly the focus shifts back onto the women instead of the men who committed those violence. As though women are responsible for managing male behavior. And one of the most uncomfortable realizations I've had is this. A lot of men who harm women are not monsters hiding in outside society. They are ordinary men shaped by the same culture everyone else was shaped by. And Andrea Dawkins once said something that disturbed me because of how true it is. She said that rape is not usually committed by men outside of social norms, but by men acting within those social norms. And that changes the conversations completely, because it means the problem is bigger than the individual evil of people. It means we have to start asking harder questions about the culture that we grew up in. About masculinity, about power, about entitlement, about the messages boys absorb before they are even old enough to fully understand them. Because if the same patterns keep repeating across generations, across countries, across religions, and across cultures, then maybe the conversation is not about how individual men are bad, but about the culture itself.
The reason dating is so hard right now is because male entitlement. People are trying to come up with so many think pieces and reasons. There is a very simple reason, and it is male entitlement. Because for the first time in history, women finally are not forced into marriage. Men created a system where women had to get married because we couldn't survive if we didn't. So the patriarchy taught men that you're entitled to women because they had no other option. So most men did get women. And then we went through a cultural shift where women no longer need men to survive, but would like a relationship with a man. So therefore, men had to essentially be nice to women, and that's where everything crumbled. Everything crumbled because men are no longer guaranteed women, and now they have to respect us. They have to be more emotionally intelligent. They have to listen. They have to have their own standards and boundaries. That's another huge issue. None of them know what they want. They don't have any standards. They don't have any boundaries because they're just picking the woman that they think is pretty. They want to date her, and then that's it. And here is a perfect example. A woman keeps posting all of her responses to a Hinge prompt of saying that she likes flowers on the first date. Now, the thing with the Hinge prompt is you do not have to answer. This is a Hinge prompt, so it's your choice if you want to answer it or not. So someone explained to me why this woman got dozens of angry or sarcastic messages from men, being so angry that she said that she likes flowers on the first date. If This is what I'm talking about, men with standards. If you are a type of man where you're like, I don't like to do that, then just swipe. That's it. She's not for you. She likes flowers on the first date. You don't want to give flowers on the first date. Okay, moving on. Everyone's okay. But men are so entitled to women that they get enraged and angry that a woman that they would possibly wants something that they don't want to give to her. So now they then get angry at her. And what made it even more wild is she then put a prompt of like, do you think that you should get a kiss on the first date? And every single guy said yes. So in summary, men think it's absolutely ludicrous to give a woman flowers on the first date, but they don't think it's ludicrous for them to shove their tongue in your mouth after talking to you for 2 hours. And what was funny in the comment section, a woman said that she did the same thing. And she was like, I don't even care about flowers. She's like, I don't even like flowers that much. She said, I just put it on because it's a great litmus test to see how absolutely crazy some men will go just from a Hinge prompt. And she was like, it's actually been pretty helpful. And it's weeded out a lot of the...
I think conversations like this usually split into two extremes. One side keeps saying that sexual violence is just about individual moral failure. Basically, bad men do bad things. Most men are good. These men are just the exceptions. Well, I don't think they're exceptions. I think they're the rule. And yes, individual accountability absolutely matters. Men chooses their own actions. But I also think that this explanation becomes too comfortable when it isolates the problem to a few evil men while avoiding bigger questions about the culture that is producing those evil men. Because if this were only about rare monsters, the numbers will not look the way they do globally. The other extreme says men are simply products of patriarchy or social conditioning, and therefore individual responsibility barely matters because society created the behavior. And honestly, I think that explanation also becomes dangerous because understanding why violence happens should never become an excuse for the people committing it. So personally, I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. The culture shapes people, and individuals still chooses what they do with what shapes them. Both things can be true at once. And I think we struggle with that because people like simple villains and simple explanations. They don't like complicated things and complexities because that will require them to think. But this issue is bigger than that because entitlement does not suddenly appear in adulthood. It starts much earlier. It starts in boyhood, in the message boys receive about masculinity, about dominance, about conquest, about getting girls, about proving themselves through sexual sex and accesses. A lot of boys grow up learning that masculinity is tied to control and pursuit, emotional suppression, and sexual validation. And some of these lessons are so normalized that adults reinforce them without even thinking. So when a little boy bothers a girl repeatedly and people laugh, they will say, oh, he just likes you. A teenage boy ignores boundaries and people call him, oh, he's very persistent. A man refuses to take no for an answer and movies frame him as romantic. And after years of this, society acts shocked when some men grow into adults who believe persistence matters more than consent. But boys are absorbing messages long before they have languages for what is happening. I think this is why conversations about violence against women cannot begin only at the point of assault. By then, years of socialization has already happened. By that time, many boys become men, in ways they barely even look like entitlement anymore. And one of the biggest places this gets reinforced now is the internet, especially in the porn industry. For a lot of boys, porn becomes their first real exposure to sex before they even experience emotional intimacy or healthy relationships or mutual desire or real conversations about consent. And what does a lot of mainstream porn teach? They teach that women are always available and they are always willing and they are always performative and they're existing for male pleasure. So women's pain gets eroticized in those porn movies and aggressions get normalized and boundaries disappear. Male gratification becomes the center of everything. Now, obviously, not every person who watches porn becomes violent. That's not what I'm saying. But I do think repeated exposure to content that constantly frames women as consumable can shape the way some men begin to see women. Especially when there are no counter conversations happening at home, in societies, or even in churches. Because if boys are learning about women primarily through porn and social media, then what exactly are they supposed to learn empathy? Where and when are they supposed to learn empathy? I think religion also has a part to play in this, being as I'm Christian. especially because religion has influenced many societies' understanding about gender, marriage, submission, and then authority. And I think certain teachings have sometimes been interpreted in ways that reinforces male entitlement, particularly around women's bodies in marriages. You see, the Bible tells us that marriage couples' bodies are for each other, but it's mostly always enforced in with the woman. A lot of women grew up hearing messages about submission long before they even heard messages about safety or emotional care or consent or even love. Some women were taught that being a good wife meant constant availability to their husband, and many husbands have taken advantage of it. And denying sex made them rebellious, Jezebels, difficult, ungodly, or even disrespectful. They're going against their head. Historically, marital rape wasn't even legally recognized in many places because marriage itself was treated like permanent consent for the man or even the woman. A woman could say no to her husband and legally it didn't matter. So the husband would end up raping the woman because the woman never agreed to it. And I really need people to understand this. Male entitlement does not always look aggressive. Sometimes it looks deeply normal. Sometimes it hides inside traditions and inside jokes. Watch those jokes. You find some truth in them. Inside family structures and inside theology. And inside, that's just how men are. And inside advice given to women about how to keep a happy man. And because it looks normal, people stop questioning it. Not me. That's what normalization has done. It makes harmful things feel very ordinary. And one of the clearest signs of how deeply this entitlement is embedded in society is what happens after women experiences violence. Because look at how the survivors are treated. Women are doubted, they are interrogated, they are blamed, and they are dissected because people are asking, what was she wearing? Why was she drinking? Why didn't she leave? Why didn't she report it immediately? Why was she alone with him? And I sit back and I think, why is the burden constantly on women to prove they deserve safety? What about the one committing the crime? Why do women have to perform perfect victimhood before people extend empathy to them? Because notice something, right? But women are given suspicion. If a woman comes out and says something, the first question is, are you sure? And when communities repeatedly protect men at the expense of women, that sends a very loud message at that. It tells women that, oh, your safety is negotiable, okay? And it tells men, which is very dangerous, and I really want to echo this. It tells men, you probably get away with this, and most men know that they will probably get away with this. And statistically, many of them have done. They have done getting away with it. That's the uncomfortable reality. Because violence against women is not rare, but because systems often fail to take it seriously. One of the hardest truths to accept is this: the absence of accountability is not separate from entitlement, it reinforces it. When society repeatedly minimizes harassment, excuses coercion, and protects abusers, silence victims, and prioritize male reputations over female safety, entitlement grows stronger. I know some men hear conversations like this and immediately feel accused. And I understand that emotional reaction. But I don't think the most useful question here is, am I one of the bad men? You should not be asking that. What you should be asking is, what ideas about women did I absorb without even realizing it? Because believe it or not, you have it. You just have not noticed them. You can genuinely love women and still carry beliefs about entitlement that you have never even examined. You can respect women and still unconsciously expect emotional labor from them, expect attention from them, softness from them, expect access from them. And I think good men, genuinely good men, are willing to question themselves honestly instead of becoming defensive. Immediately we hear conversations like this. Not because they are personally guilty for every act of violence committed by other men, but because all of us are shaped by a culture, whether we want to admit it or not. And I believe that many men are suffering under these expectations too, because entitlement damages men emotionally. It teaches men to confuse conquest with connection, control with love, and possession with intimacy. Some men grew up never fully learning how to emotionally relate to women outside attraction, performance, validation, or power, which is very tragic. I mean, you have never really felt known and loved before. Because real intimacy requires seeing another person as a full human being, not as a reward, not as a status symbol, and definitely not as someone or something that is owed to you. And I think this is part of why relationships between men and women feel so strained now. Women are exhausted from navigating entitlement, and men are emotionally disconnected in ways they don't fully understand yet. Everybody is hurting each other. Nobody feels safe. So the question becomes, what actually changes this? And honestly, if I'm to speak, I don't think awareness is enough. I don't think reposting statistics once a year changes much. And I don't think hashtags alone changes much. And I don't think even this YouTube video would do much. Because this problem starts early, which means the intervention also has to start early. We have to start talking to boys differently. Not just about avoiding crime, but about empathy. Very important. Kindness, about consent, about emotional maturity, so that they will know how to handle the emotions that they feel and not lash it out on the weaker vessels, which are the women. About boundaries and even humanity. And I honestly think one of the biggest failures in many cultures is that girls are taught how to survive men before boys are taught how to treat men or how not to violate girls. Girls learn safety almost immediately. Thus, to easily test when you get home, watch your drink, and carry protection. Avoid certain streets, be careful around certain men. But where are the equally urgent conversations with these boys who grew up to be these men? Where are the conversations teaching boys that women are not prizes, that not challenges, that they are not objects to unlock, not emotional rehabilitation centers, wherever they can handle their emotions, or not bodies existing for their validation and their pleasure? Because if we only teach girls survival without teaching boys responsibility, then we are treating the symptoms without attacking the root cause.
Like they're entitled to a beautiful woman. As a divorce lawyer, I see the long-term damage of this kind of entitlement. Men who truly believe their wives owe them affection, attention, submission, even when they've given nothing emotionally in return. He's emotionally stunted, inconsistent, can't hold a conversation without making it about himself, but still thinks he deserves someone who looks like a supermodel just because he exists. Boys are groomed from an early age to believe that women are a prize, that sex is something they're owed for being nice. Every movie is about a girl who's supposed to be theirs at the end. Everything reminds them of women, and not in a romantic way, in a possessive way, in a you belong to me kind of way. As children, they learn that being powerful means having a beautiful woman next to them. And if they don't get one, the rage builds. And that's where you see the rise of bitterness, resentment, even hatred. Entire online communities are formed around one shared belief. Women won't give me what I deserve. It's the incel mindset, the podcast rants, the high value man speeches that are just insecure men yelling into a mic. They don't want love. They want validation, status, and possession. And when women choose themselves or raise their standards or simply don't want them, they call us names. They blame feminism. They take it as a personal attack because their whole identity was built on the idea that a woman would complete them, submit to them, and validate them. If you desire women, but at the same time you do not value women as human beings, that's entitlement. And if your masculinity crumbles just because a woman doesn't want you, you were never a man to begin with. Why do some men...
All right, guys, here's a list of things you're not entitled to. So I've said this before, but one of the reasons for so much problematic male anger is male entitlement. And it's clear that a lot of men just can't tell the difference between what they actually deserve and what they just really, really, really want. So here's a list of things that you might really want, but you are not entitled to. You're not entitled to attention, and you're not entitled to intimacy. That includes immediate response to texts or an explanation of rejection. You're not entitled to sex because you're in a relationship or because you paid for dinner. You don't get to control your partner, not who they talk to, not what they wear. You might really want respect and compliance, but you're not entitled to those things either. You don't get automatic agreement. You don't get to go unchallenged. You don't get to be shielded from criticism, and your anger is not more important than someone else's pain. And you're not entitled to protection from discomfort. You don't get forgiveness just because you apologized. You don't get to avoid difficult conversations, and you don't always get a second chance. And definitely not a third, fourth, or fifth chance. Now, a lot of guys are going to see that list and they're going to think, I don't act entitled to those things, and maybe you don't. But if you want to know for sure, pay attention to how you respond to rejection. Because that is where entitlement-fueled anger shows up. When you don't get something you really, really want, how do you react?
And fathers matter deeply here. Male role models matter deeply here. Because boys are always watching men. They are watching how men speak about women, how men react to rejections, how men handle power, how men treat their wives, their girlfriends, their daughters, their female co-workers. And when women they are not attracted to are around them. Boys learn masculinity by observation long before they learn it through formal teaching. Churches need to have more honest conversations about this, because too many religious spaces have protected male authority more aggressively than they have protected the women in the church. And that has done enormous damage. Women have been silenced to protect ministries and told to forgive without accountability and told to not ruin a man's future. They're told submission is even more important than their own safety. We all know what happened to Osinachi. That is not righteousness to me. A God who values justice is not honored by communities that protect abuse, because our God values justice. And I think religious communities especially need to start treating conversations about women's safety as worldly feminism instead of basic human dignity, because women are not distractions for male holiness. Women are human beings. They are equal image bearers, they are souls, they are people. And I think men who genuinely want to be good men need spaces where they can unlearn harmful ideas without shame, but without also avoidance. Defensiveness kills growth, okay? The goal is not endless guilt. I'm not here to make you feel guilty. I'm here for us to talk openly and honestly. Honesty about what the culture has taught you as a man. Honesty about the entitlement that you have inherently worked with. And I think one of the most hopeful things is that learned behavior can also be unlearned. If entitlement can be taught, it can also be disrupted or interrupted. Men can learn emotional intelligence, men can learn empathy, men can learn healthier masculinity that does not include control or entitlement or even dominance. And women deserve a world where their humanity is not constantly negotiated, and a world where existing in public does not require constant calculation or vigilance, because that's what we do. We are constantly calculating and being vigilant because you never know what one random man is going to do to you. A world where women are allowed to move through life without carrying the burden of managing male behavior all the time. I'm not responsible for your emotions, okay? You need to learn how to deal with them, because this conversation is not even about anti-men. This is anti-entitlement. That's why I'm here. I think a world where women are safer is also a world where men are healthier emotionally. Patriarchy does not only wound women directly.
So I want to continue this discussion about men and women from picking up from where we left off, where we were talking about how a lot of men will feel entitled to telling a woman how to dress, how to look, how to be, how to show up in the world. And I think this is very akin to how someone would treat an arm. So let me explain. You have an arm right now, right? You have a hand, you have an arm. You dress up this arm with clothes, you tell this arm what to do, you tell it how to exist, you put it where you want it, you take it out, you move it when you want to, right? This is exactly how a lot of men see women. They see them as an extension of themselves, right? And what does that mean? What does an extension mean? It basically means that they see you as something that came into being the same time they did, and therefore is like inherently connected to their inherent experience. So you can also think of it as like, these men don't really see women as individuals that also have things that they're entitled to. They more so see them as objects that belong to them, right? So in a lot of men's minds, they were born into a world filled with women, and they as a man are the prize for these women. They almost see themselves as like the chosen one, you know? And this is a lot of things that a lot of men will hold on to, because as we've discussed, a lot of men don't really have any sense of self-identity or self-consciousness. They don't have any self-awareness. And so when you have low self-awareness, you have a hard time developing self-love because you don't know what to love. So you need to fill that void of self-love with something, right? And so for a lot of men, they fill it with control, pleasure, depravity, right? Hedonism, right? Addictions. And one of the biggest addictions, as we're discussing, is women, is being able to control the actions and movements of women, right? Other humans, right? Because this gives you a sense of power. It gives you a sense of feeling that you have done something, that you're important. And this is what a lot of people call entitlement, right? And it's such a bizarre thing, because when you really understand at the core of it what it means, it's so silly. So let me take to even look at it more clearly, right? Like when a man's saying that he's entitled to a woman to tell her what to do, he's moving her like the same way he would try to move an arm. But the difference is between a woman and an arm is that an arm is inherently attached to you. You know, it is part of your body, and it was given to you at birth, right? It is something so inextricably linked to you that to not have an arm, you'd have to fundamentally change your life, you know? But here's the thing, women are not like that because, first of all, the women in your life weren't born the same time as you. They have different birthdays. They have different lifestyles, different pasts, different histories. They spent most of their life disconnected from you if they're like a woman you're meeting when you're older. At this point, you are basically like, you're seeing like basically like this much of their life, right? And as you get to know this woman, presuming that you're dating, like this is like your brother or something, or not, like you're dating them or you're trying to get to know them like they're your friends or whatever, then the amount of experience, the amount of exposure you've had to this woman is so far less than the other individuals in her life, you know? So this tells me a couple of things. If a woman falls into this pattern with a man where she obeys and becomes subservient in this way that he wants her to be, it means she had a bunch of people in her lifetime that were forcing her to do that, and now she's replaying the practice. She may not like it, but she does it because this is all she knows, which is a different case, right? But if a man wants a woman to act in this way, it's likely that this man has had that relationship modeled to him multiple times. You see that? Because how do you go from believing that my arm is my arm to believing that that woman is mine? Like, you know, how do you go to that? How do you make that leap? Well, it has to be conditioned into you, right? It has to be something that you believe growing up, right? And so it was likely that that most men come from families that don't acknowledge the truth of reality. Like, self-awareness is a very rare commodity. Like, people who come onto this channel and learn new shit know that you guys are special because the majority of human beings are ignorant of themselves. It is like a fact at this current time, 2026, right? So majority of humans are ignorant of themselves. What does that mean? They don't know why they do things. They don't know how their body works. They don't know how their energy works. They don't know how their mind works. That is like, imagine there was a race of conscious human beings at one point. Like, what we're experiencing now would be akin to like the entire race dying out to a plague, because there's no real human beings left. They're just empty vessels. You know, it's like all the spirit, all the soul, all the life has been drained. And now we're in this reemergence where people are trying to bring it back. But you got to understand that most people never grew up with that. They grew up primarily thinking that I need to survive, I need to get my needs met, and I need to do that through whatever means is necessary. And so entitlement, from a lot of men's perspective, is not seen as like them being aggressive or them being mean or them being rude or bashful or disrespectful. It's seen as a necessity in order to maintain homeostasis. Right? And so when you make these claims, they have such a boldness when they say it because they see it as fundamentally necessary to their being, the same way they see an arm as part of their body. So I hope this video helps you understand male entitlement in this context. But yeah, it can get a little deeper. So if you want to go deeper, just let me know.
A world where women are not public property, but are humans with boundaries, agency, interior lives of fear, desire, complexity, and personhood. If we've never challenged these beliefs at the root, then nothing really changes. So this conversation is not about saying men are monsters. It's about asking what kind of culture repeatedly teaches boys that women exist for them. Let the church say amen. And whether we are finally willing to confront that honestly, okay? Because nearly 1 in 3 women experiencing violence is not random. That is cultural. And 97% of rapists walking free is not random either. That is also structural. And if enough women across generations are saying, this is happening to us, then maybe the real danger is not that women are speaking too loudly. The problem is never with the women who are speaking about their experiences. The problem is with the people causing it. And maybe the real danger is how long society has trained these women to stay silent. Because you cannot dismantle what you refuse to name. And the name of what keeps happening or keeps harming women quietly, globally, and repeatedly is called entitlement. Male ego and male entitlement. Not madness. It's not even isolated evil or even rare exceptions. It's entitlement. They believe they're entitled to whatever women are or women have. And it is also learned, it is reinforced, and it is protected. Why? How do I know this? I know this because they are rarely punished. If this was learned, then this can also be unlearned. And if enough people are willing to confront that discomfort, then it is very possible. I'm Elizabeth, and this channel exists for people who are tired of shallow conversations. If you want deeper discussions about faith, about culture, identity, gender, womanhood, and the things society is too afraid to talk about or they are told us not to question, then you have to subscribe because there is more where that came from. And I will see you in my next video. Bye-bye.